what we think is the textbook example of what a species needs is actually just the type of habitat in a anthropogenic landscape that species is clinging on in.
Yeah.
But actually it's not optimal.
Welcome to the Green Urbanist, a podcast for urbanists fighting climate change. I'm Ross.
Ealing Beaver Project is a collaborative project between, here's my elevator pitch now, but it's a collaborative project between Ealing Wildlife Group, Citizen Zoo, Friends of Horsenden Hill and Ealing Council. And the four kind of parties are bringing different things.
Yes, I'm back for another episode with Sean McCormack. This is part 2 of our conversation about urban rewilding in London. Sean is the chairperson of Ealing Wildlife Group, and he's involved in reintroducing a number of species, including beavers, to his part of London, which is called Ealing, the London Borough of Ealing. If you haven't heard part 1 of this 2-part series, go back and listen to that. It's the episode just before this one. It'll probably make more sense if you listen to that one first. And in this episode, we get a bit more into the details on the projects he's involved in, particularly focusing on the practicalities of reintroducing beavers to an urban park. You know, the kind of decisions and, in a sense, the urban design that goes into that, thinking about how people interact with the space and how you basically stop the beavers getting out. We also talk about, on that theme, you know, a debate about the management of urban nature. How much should we be managing nature in cities? The way that maybe he's moving away from talking about rewilding and more talking about nature restoration. The challenge of using the term rewilding, which can be a contentious term or misleading in some cases. We also talk about the importance of partnerships and collaboration in getting these kind of projects done. The way he, as a sort of part of a community group, the Ealing Wildlife Group, are working with the local council, London Borough of Ealing, but also other partners like Citizen Zoo. Citizen Zoo are a social enterprise who are working on rewilding and conservation projects and really try to bring communities in with that, thus the name Citizen Zoo, I guess. And I had the chance, the day I was there talking to Sean in Ealing, there also happened to be Elliot Newton and Ben Stockwell of Citizen Zoo there on site, showing around some people from the Greater London Authority. And I also got a chance to interview them. So do listen towards the end of the podcast, and you'll get to hear their voices as well, and a little bit about the kind of work that they're doing. There's a couple of images from this recording session, which we did live in Ealing, up on my Substack blog. The link to that is in the episode description. That's a companion blog post. You can also you can sign up to the newsletter, and you'll get notified when there's new episodes. You'll also get notified when I write other things like articles, which I haven't done in a while because I've been too busy, but I would like to get a bit more writing done in the coming months. So stay tuned there for all the news and content from Green Urbanist. Thanks for listening and enjoy this episode.
Yeah. The beauty of rewilding is that you kind of let nature take over and do its own thing, and it comes up often with very surprising results that you wouldn't have otherwise known. The beauty as well of Paradise Fields is we're not starting from scratch in a manicured urban park. Actually, Paradise Fields has had the pedal of management taken off a little bit, and it's been allowed to rewild quite a lot compared to some of our other parks.
Okay, gotcha.
So as I bring you round now, you'll see that a lot of the meadow habitats is reverting to thorny scrub, and we're getting actually a lot of natural tree regeneration. We have had no coppicing or tree management on this site for 15 or 20 years, which is why, unfortunately, it's become overshaded and less suitable for the likes of water voles and dragonflies and things like that. So we're actually starting from a baseline that is pretty wild already, or rewilded already. And that's always a continuum. It's not like this site is rewilded and this site is managed. It's like if you step off management of an urban park for 2 years, it's rewilding. Nature is taking over and turning into kind of rough grassland habitat rather than kind of amenity grassland mode lawns. But here we've had 10 or 15 years of very little management. So as I bring you around, it's already pretty immaculate, amazing beaver habitat. It's ripe for beavers to come in now and start introducing that dynamism and introducing those trophic cascades where they're going to fell some of those trees. They're going to start to introduce pulses of light into aquatic ecosystems. They're going to create new ponds and wetlands that actually supercharge the biodiversity here. And it's going to be really, really fascinating to watch it emerge. And uniquely, the public are going to be able to watch it emerge because they'll be able to walk in just like you and I have through a McDonald's car park and see some beavers on their doorstep. I'll just bring you down here for a second. This is like what you would imagine a beaver wetland to look like already. So we had the Beaver Trust came and did habitat feasibility study on the site so that we could support our application to Natural England for the licence and say this is going to be good habitat, the beavers' welfare is going to be prioritised, it's a suitable location to reintroduce beavers. And one of the reasons is it's already, as I said, rewilded, it's already got lots of wet woodland, it's got the tree species that beavers like. I think you walk in here and you kind of can see that this is a bit wild. It's a bit kind of its own free will, and it's like perfect prime beaver habitat. The Beaver Trust came and they surveyed, I think, 10 to 12 different sites in London that had expressed interest in would we be suitable as a site to reintroduce beavers to London as part of the London Beaver Working Group. And the Beaver Trust came here to Paradise Fields and said it was probably the best habitat they'd seen in London for beaver reintroduction.
And do you think that's largely because the management has been stepped back for over a decade?
Yeah.
So there's the benefits to budget cuts, possibly.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this is the thing. Like, we've got this obsession with tidying, managing, neatening, controlling nature. But actually, maybe we need to rethink that. And one of the benefits to council budgets being cut across the country and parks management maybe being like the last on the list in terms of budget allowance is that actually nature has been allowed to get a bit of control back, or to take the charge a little bit. And here's a perfect example of that. Now that has pros and cons. So one of the difficulties of that is that you may look at it and go, oh my god, it's amazingly wild and beautiful, and look at all these trees and it's gorgeous. And again, trees are like the golden boy of conservation and climate change, but natural kind of tree colonization and closed canopies, if we step back in time, are not really the natural order of things, because we would have had large herbivores controlling tree cover
coming in
and keeping that flux and dynamism going and creating those trophic cascades. And beavers were a large part of that, where they were opening the canopy in certain areas and allowing that mosaic of light and shade to happen. So here we think one of the reasons that it became less suitable for water voles in general, but also maybe impossible for water voles to cling on in a little isolated population, is that it just became too shaded. And water voles they've been recorded eating 227 different plant species, so they need a diverse array of aquatic plants. And if you look here under the canopy of these willow trees on the edge of our main lagoon where we're reintroducing beavers, we've got common reeds, really dominant. We've got a couple of nettles, a vetch species, a few grasses, a couple of sedges. Okay, so we've probably got a dominance of 5 or 10 plant species in this area. Whereas if there was a bit of dynamism and if these trees were coming down and we were getting pulses of light and a bit more of a flux of habitats and light pulses and things, we would probably have 20, 30 plant species existing in a constant state of flux in this ecosystem. Brilliant. Which would support more water voles as the indicator species, but support all of the invertebrates and things that would thrive on that habitat as well. So nature as we know it is like quite an artificial state in such an urban landscape especially, but such a man-made densely populated place as the UK. We're unfortunately one of the most nature depleted countries in the world, because we have encroached and interfered on natural processes so much, and what we think of as beautiful nature is actually very much like human altered natural ecosystems. And what we kind of want to show here at the Beaver Project is kind of a lofty goal maybe, but show that actually really handing it over to nature and restoring some of those kind of processes and ecosystem engineers and more of the rewilding principles rather than traditional man-made conservation tinkering can actually come up with some pretty extraordinary results.
There was a question I really wanted to ask you, which was what you've been through this whole journey, this whole process. I'm sure there's people listening who would love to do something similar in their area. What advice would you give to them?
Yeah, good question. I mean, this project has come about like fairly organically over time, and it was a real seed of an idea about 3 or 4 years ago that started with water vole conservation, and then kind of had that realization moment that beavers are the missing link with water voles. And I think starting small, like we've done at Ealing Wildlife Group, and just if you can get involved with a local organisation that's doing something for whatever floats your boats, if it's climate or environment or habitats or wildlife, get involved with them. I found in Ealing there wasn't the sweet spot organisation that was very much wildlife species conservation focused. So I sort of created one for myself. And it's grown into something absolutely huge and brilliant and really, really rewarding. Big part of my life, which I'm very appreciative of. It's built a community for me in London where, you know, I'm not a native, if you guessed from my accent, just like you.
Are you an invasive species?
I'm a non-native species. I don't know if I'm invasive yet. But it's just built a community. So I think, you know, wherever we live, I've been like a little bit low and down this week with some of the news around new oil pursuits, and it feels like sometimes as environmentalists we're banging our head against a brick wall, and politicians are not really concerned about our planet, but having that local aspect or something to focus on that's like smaller scale but impactful is really, really important for me, and I know a lot of people in Ealing Wildlife Group say the same. It's kind of a cliche now, but think global, act local is a phrase that I use quite a lot. And I think, you know, we all as individuals have a responsibility and have an ability to be the change we want to see in the world, and that's again quite cliched and things, but I do think there's something really powerful in actually stepping up and getting involved and taking some action. We can't like convince the Prime Minister to make massive big economic decisions that are climate friendly. We're just not going to do that. But what we can do is get involved in something on our doorstep and improve our local landscape, and I think that's really powerful. So if you don't have a group or something in your area that is doing that or kind of appeals to you, maybe start something up. I mean, social media is great for gathering like-minded people together and you know, getting them to be positive change, you know.
So find like-minded people and start from there.
There's a real power in that, and there's a solidarity in it, and I think, like, especially in urban areas, it's very easy to feel isolated and to feel cut off from, you know, your community and things like that. I've lived in London now for 13 years, and certainly when I was working as a vet and working all the hours under the sun, I just wasn't really feeling connected. And actually what's made me feel connected is starting a group like this, where it's all people putting in their own time and voluntary hours into trying to do good for our environment, our green spaces, our climate, our wildlife. There's a real comfort and solidarity in that, and just, you know, focalizing your worries about the world with other like-minded people is really, really powerful and really comforting.
And see where you can go from there. I suppose if people are maybe have taken that first step or starting to get involved with maybe local groups or setting up their own group, what do you think could be done with, say, in London to really scale up efforts like this? Like, maybe in another sense, like, what barriers did you hit that you wish could be lifted to make it easier for other people?
Land ownership is a big one. So unfortunately, you know, we live in a world that's capitalistic and greedy, and wealth is not distributed evenly, and despite our desire to care for the planet and landscape and ecosystem, we often don't have control over those spaces because we don't own them.
Absolutely.
We have been really, really fortunate in Ealing, and to Ealing Council's credit, despite a lot of the criticism they get on certain things, to Ealing Council's credit, especially the parks team, they are very, very open-minded and progressive when it comes to our green spaces, not just being a place for people to enjoy, but being a place that are a natural capital, natural resource, important for biodiversity and things like that. So it's been a really successful collaboration. And a lot of wildlife groups and some feedback we've had is that it's very unusual for you as a conservationist and a wildlife group to be getting along with the local council. But if we don't get along with them and we don't actually bring them on board and try and be friends with them, then we're probably not going to make much progress, because if we're constantly the enemy and we're constantly just battling them and criticizing them and pointing out all their bad decisions, then actually you don't get a collaborative friendship there. So we've sort of cultured very kind of with intent, we've cultured a relationship that is collaborative and supportive, and we defend some of the council's decisions on, you know, social media and things where people are complaining like, oh, the grass is all scruffy and the council are lazy and they're not mowing my green space outside my house, and we will come in and say, you don't need every green space to be mown to within an inch of its life every 3 weeks during the summer, burning petrol and da-da-da-da-da. We need to have some areas of long grass and scruffiness or messy margins in our urban landscape. So we're coming in and we're basically defending some of the council decisions that are changing over towards a less manicured and more wilding kind of approach. We also have a relationship where we've built that level of trust, I think. Maybe someone from the council would disagree, but we've built that level of trust where we can criticise them as well.
Okay.
And where we can challenge some of the decisions that are coming from the top down, or coming from the likes of the events team not talking to the parks team and wanting to put a big music festival on some of our richest biodiverse meadows where we've reintroduced Harvest Mice the year before. It's like, stop, hang on, wait. You know, so we've become a collaborator, supporter, but a trusted critic. Wow, yeah. And I think that's really, really important, especially in the urban landscape where you've got competing needs from the community. You know, you need to try and accommodate people and sports and amenity and leisure with carbon capture and green space and wilding principles and biodiversity. You know, it's a tricky balance. But I think getting involved a little bit in local politics and not just being a moaner talking about problems all the time, but actually coming up with solutions is really important.
Yes, well said. We've stopped here just at as a stream is coming through.
This is the main. Yeah, this is the brook. So this is the permanent water source on site.
Gotcha.
So this is a tributary of the Costons Brook, which runs into the River Brent, which runs into the River Thames. So it's upper reaches of the Thames Valley.
Gotcha.
You can see here it's running through a little man-made kind of culvert. And interestingly, this is a sarsen stone. Do you know what a sarsen stone is?
No.
So it's Ice Age stone that was uncovered basically when they were doing some of the engineering works here. A big, massive boulder or rock from like an Ice Age deposit.
Gotcha.
And they were wondering what to do with it. And when they made this little culvert, it was actually cutting into the riverbed quite a lot. So they put the sarsen stone here and diverted some of the flow and some of the dynamics of the river. If we followed this brook upstream, a year ago we wouldn't have been able to follow this brook upstream. The entire stretch of this brook was completely overgrown. It was impenetrable brambles and vegetation, and a lot of historic litter that had just piled up here for decades that was never touched because it wasn't accessible. So we got a lot of our volunteer team on Ealing's Team Beaver to come down, and we cut back a lot of the vegetation to open up some light to the stream and to get rid of the litter before the beavers arrive.
Okay.
So we've done a little bit of management of, or modification of the habitat already that the beavers would do, and basically upstream here is where the Costons Brook runs into site, through a concrete culvert that runs under the Grand Union Canal. We're taking the fence line back about 20 metres from the canal side, A, to make the fence line invisible from the canal towpath, and B, to make it less attractive to the beavers to try and want to get to the canal and escape. So yeah, the beaver-proof fencing is going in this week and last, and it's all getting very exciting. It's starting to look like an actual enclosure now.
The only thing that's a giveaway that we're still in London is that there's a shopping trolley in the water over there.
Is there? I pulled one out the other week. I'll have to pull that one out as well. Where is it?
It's over this side across
Is
the
it? Oh God, yeah.
That's
had,
just a classic city thing.
Documentary filmmaker here. Oh, I see it. Yeah, documentary filmmaker here yesterday, starting his approach, and I just nonchalantly grabbed a Marks and Spencer's trolley off the side of the path and brought it back to the retail park, and he's like, "If only I had my camera now. This is classic. This is brilliant." I said, "Don't worry, there will be more shopping trolley rescue missions going on." So yeah, we are very much in an urban river landscape, and occasionally we have to rescue some shopping trolleys. They're rewilding shopping trolleys.
They are. It's not. Yeah.
Okay, I'll get that one another time, because it's.
You might need your wellies for
I
that
might
one.
need my waders or wellies for that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want me to show you the fence just to talk about
Absolutely,
how
yeah.
it works? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think, from walking through this site just a little bit, there are multiple entry points that are currently open for
Yes.
people just to come in and out. So how are you managing that with the beavers?
Yes, so we've gone through a really long process and discussion with Natural England on what we're going to do here and how we're going to make it beaver proof and public proof. So we've got 3 entry exit points to the site, and those 3 points are going to have double gated, self-closing kind of airlock systems where people can walk through a series of 2 gates to get in. They'll close behind them so that people can come through but beavers can't get out.
Okay.
That's the theory. We have heard, since being granted our license, that there is a relatively high escape rate or leakage rate of beaver enclosures. So we're being very, very honest and open that, do you know what, this is a 5-year project, and over the course of 5 years, what's the likelihood of a beaver getting out of this enclosure? Relatively high, and we're okay with that. But the good thing about beaver escapes is that recapturing a beaver and returning it to the enclosure is relatively easy as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So as part of our budget, we have budgeted for a big Bavarian beaver trap, and we can bait it with carrots and apples, which are like crack to a beaver, and we can capture those beavers again once we know where they are. So even if they get out, we will be able, hopefully, to recapture them and return them for their own welfare to the enclosure again.
I mean, you don't want them crossing the road.
No, so you can see here the fencing going in. Hey, how you doing? Yeah, good. So yeah, the fencing, as you can see, it's a really exciting part of the project. This week and last week, the guys have been here beavering away and getting the fencing put in. So this is one of the main entry points to the site, which is over the Grand Union Canal. The bridge here in front of you is the canal towpath, and where we're standing now will be the first gate in on this side of the site.
Okay.
And then there'll be a gate about 10 metres downhill. And the beaver fencing, as you can see, it's in progress, but it's basically I think it's 1.5 metres high, then with an overhang, which kind of is directed into the beaver enclosure. So it means that beavers can't climb out. If they do climb, they're very cumbersome animals. They're quite a large animal. Very much land-based, not very agile
not natural
creatures.
climbers.
No, they're not. But if a tree came down or whatever near the fence, it's a risk they would get out. But that overhang coming into the enclosure means it's more difficult for them to climb out.
Gotcha.
And then what's not on here, but it's going to go on next, is a mesh skirt, so about 1 metre of mesh on the bottom layer, pinned into the ground, so that if the beavers do meet the fence line and start to test and go, I can smell water over there, I want to get into the canal, they won't be able to dig out, because even if they start to try and dig, they're going to meet mesh.
Okay.
So it's got kind of top and bottom layer of mesh to keep them in on this side of the fence. Now, obviously, it's a bit of a logistical challenge, and this is a public area, and people are used to using the sites in certain ways, so we may have issues with people wanting to get through in the kind of unofficial routes through the site. So we're going to have to monitor the fence line over the next few months before the beavers come. So one of the reasons we've put it in now is to actually test and learn how the public here interacts with this fence.
Gotcha.
Before we put beavers
clever.
in, putting the fence in a day before we put beavers in, and then going, oh, someone's trampled down the fence or cut a massive hole in, a human-shaped hole in it, and our beavers are now in Birmingham in front of the canal. It's kind of a bit of a fail, isn't it? So we're very well prepared. I'm not afraid to blow our trumpet on that one and say, we've got time,
Really,
we've planned it well, and we're doing a lot of public engagement on site with our, rangers and volunteer days here, and talking to people about, do you notice beavers coming and what that means? And we're talking to dog walkers about, we really want people to keep their dogs on leads when the beavers come, and blah, blah, blah. And we're getting a lot of support. One or two little grumbles here and there, and no doubt people, when you try and start to change people's behaviour, in terms of access in particular, people can sometimes get a bit annoyed with fencing or being blocked and their usual habits and things. So it's all a learning curve. It's all something that we need to kind of work with the local community and get them to see the benefit of, this might look like ugly fencing, but actually what it facilitates us to do brings a lot more positive benefits to the local community.
Got my design hat on. I'm wondering what can be done to make it more invisible or attractive. Can you put planting right up against it to sort of...
We can. So it does look very stark at the moment. It kind of looks like a bit of a prison compound, doesn't it? Which is a pity. But it looks terrible now. It will naturalise. So we, before the bird breeding season this spring, we were in a rush. We were like, we need to introduce beavers this autumn. We need to get clearance done before March, before birds start breeding. And we need to basically clear this perimeter. So we've cleared about, as you can see, about a 10-metre strip all around the site where the fencing is going to go in, to allow the contractor space to get straight lines and runs of fencing. So it does look like a prison compound. It looks pretty gross right now. But in time, in a year or two, that mesh skirt on the ground level is going to be completely invisible, because the plants will grow through it and enmesh it and embed it into the fabric of the ground cover. The site, or the fence itself, will have plants like bramble and bindweed and weeds, aka wildflowers, growing up through it. We're going to have to be careful a little bit on what grows in the vicinity of the fence on the inside level, but a lot of the clearance work we've done also, we've created some dead hedging, which you can see along here, which is habitat that kind of disguises the fence and will green up over time and provide habitat for mammals and birds and amphibians and reptiles and things. So yes, it does look stark because it's literally going in this week, but it'll green up and it'll amalgamate into the site and soften over time, and we're going to allow that. But one of the key tasks, I suppose, and especially in the first few months post-release, is that we're going to have volunteer-led teams going out and doing daily fence patrols and just keeping an eye on the fence and making sure that someone hasn't cut a hole in it, or the beavers haven't felled a tree onto it, or there hasn't been like storm damage or whatever. So we want this fence to be, beaver-proof for quite a long time. And hopefully, maybe, at the end of the 5-year trial, the fences can come down and the beavers can be free in London. And that's the ultimate goal, is that we've learned we can live alongside this species in the urban context. And wouldn't it be great if we had them living wild and free lives again, and restoring our river ecosystem health and providing those ecosystem services and nature-based solutions to some of our problems, and putting budgets and systems in place that we can manage them where they are causing problems. If they're causing flooding in a local area of sports pitches or a golf course rather than farmland, in this concept. Imagine, oh my God, the green is a bit wet because of bloody beavers. But those are the problems that we have to deal with in an urban landscape where there's competing needs. And having visited Bavaria, for instance, that has reintroduced beavers in the 1960s and has systems in place to manage beavers, it's like, we need to have these discussions. This animal is coming back. This animal is going to be back in urban centres up and down the country before long, and we need to learn how to live alongside them, because the benefits of having beavers back in our landscape far, far outweigh the disadvantages.
Yeah.
And there are problems with beavers in the landscape for very...
Oh, sorry, I thought you was filming.
Keep going.
No, just radio. Yeah. Yeah. So we do need to have systems in place that allow us to manage beavers.
And tricky conversations.
Nothing's black and white in conservation, and rewilding, has almost become a bit of a contentious word.
Absolutely, yeah.
We're talking about, this is part of our Rewilding Ealing initiative, but we're sort of moving away from using that word, and we're kind of talking about like nature restoration.
You're moving away from using the word rewilding towards restoration, and those are different concepts, aren't they? So what?
In terms of climate and carbon capture and biodiversity,
puritanical
and flooding and things
would
like
say
that.
that we're not rewilding.
We need to have
Ealing.
systems in
It's
place
too
that
urban,
allow
it's
us
too
to
man-made,
manage
it's
it
too
very
many
well.
different
constraints on the land and too many stakeholders with a stake in the game to call it true rewilding, because true rewilding is really allowing natural processes to take over and lead, and no human management.
Okay.
And species reintroductions are part of rewilding, but
They're not
the only part, and they're often the most contentious part.
Yes.
So, bringing back lynx or wolves to the UK, everyone's up in arms about it because it has catastrophic ramifications for some stakeholders, like sheep farmers, for example.
Yeah.
And it's, dangerous and crazy and wild, and it's a bit too out of our comfort zone. But species reintroductions are only a part of rewilding. Rewilding is just allowing natural processes to take over. But admittedly, in the urban landscape, and here in Ealing, where we've got like urban parks to play with, we're not truly rewilding because there's an element of management here. We have to keep these paths clear. This is part of the capital ring. We've just seen people walking on it first time stepping foot on site because they're walking around London. We have to manage the meadows. If we want to maintain meadow habitat and open habitat, we have to manage that through mowing or scrub clearance or whatever. Or now what we're doing in terms of, as I said, nature restoration, is we're moving over to more sympathetic and natural methods of management.
Okay.
So Horsenden Hill, for example, our ranger John has obtained some cattle, Shetland cows, to do some conservation grazing to keep that dynamism going and to mimic the natural processes of our ancestral cattle, the aurochs, that would have maintained this kind of open, dynamic, like woodland pasture kind of ecosystems that we would have had. So we're kind of tinkering around and playing with habitat management in kind of very interventionist ways and stepping back a little bit. Like if you look here in front of us, we've got, apartment blocks and towers, which looks very urban.
Yeah.
But then we've got a very much a sort of NEP style, rewilded, scrubby grassland system, which has been allowed to just go.
Yeah.
The thing it's missing is natural herbivores that would have been coming in and maybe pushing back some of that scrub and tree encroachment. So if we just let this go for another decade or two with no management, we would lose the grassland habitat and the openness of it, and it would turn into something else. Because nature and ecosystems are constantly in flux. They're constantly changing over time. They're not like one single habitat that just exists and persists in an isolated state. We used to have natural processes and influencers like cattle and horses and wild boar and beavers and things like that maintaining a flux in the system. Now we don't, and we tend to like step in with machines and do it, or proxies for those wild animals or domesticated livestock to graze and do it. But I think Rewilding Ealing is kind of like the initiative we took, and the urban community, interestingly, is far less opposed to the term rewilding and far more enamoured with the term rewilding than rural communities, farming communities, who are kind of massively generalising, but seeing the term rewilding as a threat to their livelihood and a threat to their way of life and what they do, because it has become divisive. And I think, we're definitely moving away from that term into more like nature restoration, which is more of a positive, optimistic kind of thing than this divisive thing of rewilding is getting people off the land because we've ruined it all and we're not part of nature and we need nature to do its own thing without people involved. It's like, you have to involve people. You can't not involve people, especially in a country like the UK where we are densely populated in the vast majority of the land, and you can't exclude people from the land, because then it becomes them and us, and then nature becomes the enemy. We actually, and this project is a good example, we want to show that you need to live alongside nature and work with nature, and we can't live without nature. So,
and if you asked indigenous people around the world, they would probably say that humans are keystone species that are vital for nature thriving.
We are, and a lot of what we consider to be our most precious habitats only exist because of us. So things like heathland or chalk grassland or open, wildflower-rich meadow habitats, all of these things are habitats that exist since we became agriculturalists, and lost our kind of nomad hunter-gatherer lifestyles and became agriculturalists and eventually capitalists. But a lot of these, what we consider to be precious habitats, are actually human-willed and human-derived habitats. And yes, they support certain species that traditional conservation can get really focused on, like, we are conserving this habitat for rare heathland species like Dartford warblers and woodlarks and nightjars and da-da-da. But actually, if you step back in time and went back a few thousand years, those species mightn't have existed in the same numbers in Britain at all, because those habitats didn't really exist. Or those species, interestingly, on the rewilding approach, those species might have existed in far higher numbers in completely different habitats than what we're used to them clinging onto in a man-made landscape or a man-willed landscape. So the rewilding approach often turns up really, really interesting results, where what we think is the textbook example of what a species needs is actually just the type of habitat in a anthropogenic landscape that species is clinging on in. But actually it's not optimal. It's suboptimal, and that's just where the species is persisting. And if we allowed nature to take over, we would see that species is actually doesn't read the textbooks that we've created and needs something completely different, or would thrive if we just stepped off the management pedal a little bit and let nature do its thing.
Well, if the baseline that we think of as natural is us
the
studying
last couple of 100 years,
a heavily modified landscape,
then
of course we'll have gaps in our knowledge and we'll have misunderstandings.
Absolutely. I've just spied Elliot, my co-conspirator on the beaver project, who is the co-founder of Citizen Zoo, and I think it'd be really interesting to just get a few words from him on why he's embarked on this bonkers beaver project.
Thanks for sort of joining me here. Good to bump into you. Can you tell us a bit about who you are and what you do?
Oh, great. So my name's Elliot Newton. I'm one of the co-founders of Citizen Zoo, and I'm sitting here with Ben, who's our senior urban rewilding officer. And Citizen Zoo is an organisation that is all about inspiring people to be connected to nature, and we have the fundamental belief that everybody has the ability to be a conservationist. And we recognise that in the UK context, we have about 82% of people live in the urban environment. London's got 9 million people living in it, and these are people that we want to be connected to nature. So so many of our projects revolve around empowering communities to be at the heart of these conservation solutions, but also trying to challenge the perceptions of what nature and engagement with nature and rewilding means in more urban contexts, like where we're standing right now.
Fantastic. Anything from you?
Just to reintroduce myself as well. So I'm Ben. I work for Citizen Zoo as a senior urban rewilding officer, and my role is really to coordinate and managing our various projects. And as Elliot said, we put community right at the heart of everything we do, and that's because obviously all the opportunities around engagement. We're working on various projects. So over in Kingston, we're working on a waterfall reintroduction project, which, to give an example of how we kind of embedded the community right at the heart of that, it's had about 350 local people involved since it began in 2019. And that involved everything from surveying the river, looking for viable habitat, right through to actually the reintroduction itself. So last summer we had 75 people coming out and helping us with that release, which is incredible. So we put a lot of emphasis on getting local people involved and really empowering them to be the change within their local communities, and we think that's the best way to make a real difference for wildlife and for people as well.
What's the benefit of getting local volunteers involved rather than, say, just hiring people to sort of do the job? It'd probably be quicker and easier just to get professionals in to do it. So why get the community involved?
Well, it's such a big opportunity to engage people with nature. And what we look for projects is longevity and sustainability, and embedding nature and those projects within the community, getting a sense of community ownership means if you get a contractor and he's there one day, he's gone the next, and their project might come to an end. But if you embed it over the community, and for example, the Paradise Fields beaver project we're talking to, these want to be the people's beavers, right? We want the beavers are part of that community, and people come in here with a sense of pride, a sense of ownership that they've contributed to this project, and feeling that they, if they really care and value this space, it'll be safeguarded into the long term. So it's about embedding it into sort of community, seeing the natural environment as part of the community to which people belong to, and not just something that contractors come in and deliver on the side as an externality.
Brilliant.
Yeah, just to build on that, I mean, getting local people involved from the offset, it does give you that element of longevity. So, I mean, again, going back to the waterfall project, we had people right the way through COVID, kind of in the deepest depths of lockdown, going out on the river and looking for signs of invasive American mink, and it was a great way for people to get out involved, but also contributing to the project. And since the release, we've got people on a weekly basis doing exactly that still, but also checking camera traps, looking for signs of the voles, but also looking for other species on the river. And that's something we're going to emulate on this project as well. So we've got 10 camera traps on site, and we'll have about 20 volunteers who are going to be checking those camera traps. So helping input into the project, helping us build up our baseline data set, and also just getting people outdoors and experience wildlife firsthand, and being part of a project firsthand.
So what's your involvement in Paradise Fields here, the beaver reintroduction?
Yeah, so of course, as I'm sure Sean mentioned, this is a really amazing collaborative effort of Ealing Council, Friends of Horsenden Hill, and of course the amazing Friends of Ealing Wildlife Group, which is does so much amazing conservation work in the borough. So, but I suppose as an organisation, Citizen Zoo is really interested in what's going on here. In 2020, we set up something called the London Beaver Working Group, and that was to sort of visualise London and try and prepare people for eventuality when beavers might one day show up here unannounced. For example, we know in Kent, for example, there's about 300 free-living beavers.
Is there?
So we think beavers are slowly encroaching towards, or actually at sometimes fast encroaching towards like London's waterways. And we want to have a London that is prepared and proactive and ready to embrace these beavers and expect the embrace the amazing ecosystem engineering services that they can deliver, from flood risk alleviation to carbon sequestration to biodiversity. We've got a southern hawk, a dragonfly flying above our heads just as we speak. So we know there's so much potential that beavers can bring and a benefit that they can bring. So, and recognising that they're not just a wilderness species. You look across Europe, you see them living in Berlin, you see them living in Munich, we see them living in North America and places like Vancouver. So what we wanted to bring was sort of like a strategic perspective. So how can we apply this to a London level, using the London Beaver Working Group as a vehicle to that, but also supporting the project in any way that we can. So providing, we've got Ben here as a senior rewilding officer, we have Digby as another urban rewilding officer who comes and supports the project. So we're just here to try and collaborate and just support, because so much of this project is run by volunteers and stuff. We're just here to try and take some of that workload away. Some of the more sort of administration elements aren't maybe as exciting. Just really try and be that sort of supportive, be part of that, a really proactive member of that wider team. Yeah,
fantastic.
Yeah.
Just to add on that as well, so as part of the London Beaver Working Group, one of the main things we were doing was actually looking at sites right the way across London. So I think we looked at 10 over 2 survey days, and Elliot and myself went to literally all 4 corners of London in one day last January. And this is the second to last one that we came to, and it was by far and away the best, not just in terms of habitat, but in terms of the potential for community engagement. So as far as kind of Citizen Zoo were involved with that, we were just hugely excited about the potential for it, and it was great to have Sean take us round in those kind of early stages. And then since then, we've been working very much a collaborative project, as Elliot said, and we've been working side by side with all the different members of the team to make sure that we're keeping the ball rolling and making sure that we're getting everything progressed ahead of the release in October.
The non-glamorous work that has to be done. the real heroes. Before we sort of leave, any sort of final things you'd like to sort of say to the listeners? Where can they find out about Citizen Zoo? How can they get involved?
Well, there's a website. So you just go onto the Citizen Zoo website. There's lots of information there about not only how we our projects, but also how we view rewilding in the urban context. Because we really think London is an amazing place for, so many people living here, so huge opportunities to engage people. So we want to live in a wilder London where more people are engaged with nature, and this is going to be an incredible flagship project on that journey, I think.
Awesome. Any final words from you, Ben?
If you'd like to get involved, head to our volunteer page. So there's got all of our upcoming volunteering opportunities on there, including camera trapping training for this project at Paradise Fields. We've got community field surveys days going out, so we've got a botanical specialist coming out this weekend, as well as a mollusk specialist in about a month's time. So lots going on there, and please sign up to our newsletter as well to hear about all those upcoming opportunities as well.
Sweet. Excellent.
Great.
And one of their downfalls, because I don't know if you know about castoreum, beaver anal gland secretions, do you?
First time I've heard that sentence.
Beaver anal gland secretions. I'm talking about it remarkably often. As a vet, I'm talking about anal gland secretions anyway. But beavers secrete this substance called castoreum. Beaver's name in scientific terms is castor fibre, the Eurasian beaver, and they produce castoreum, which was very valued, and one of the reasons they were hunted to extinction was for their meat, for their pelt, and for their castoreum. Castoreum, I don't know who discovered that you eat a beaver's arse juice and it has medicinal properties, but it does. And the reason it does is that beavers eat a lot of willow, and willow contains salicylic acid, which is the active ingredient in aspirin. So beaver's anal gland secretions has anti-inflammatory and pain-relieving properties through castoreum. Someone discovered that and thought, you know what, this is a precious resource. I'm going to drink my beer, flavour it with castoreum, which has a vanilla kind of flavour, and then eat the castoreum after to cure my hangover. Yeah, so there you go.
System.
Fun facts.
There you go.
Yeah.